Is it true, as Alexander Corey put it, that man has lost his place in the world, and that the scientific revolution has brought about the destruction of the cosmos, the disappearance of the conception of the world as a finite, closed, and hierarchically ordered whole? Historians of science would certainly agree. After all, the modern conception of the universe is nothing like the crafted, ingeniously designed, and ordered one of the classical world. The pre-Copernican universe made sense, or, let's say, conformed to the expectations of man, who, as a techne-endowed creature with an enterprising sense, is naturally driven to likewise view the world. That forsaken cosmos appeared to him as one machine, the parts of which were interdependent, an immense edifice with countless floors. Each level was assigned a definite function. Each occupant had its precise, exclusive place in it. There were no privations or gaps between things, that the difference between species is a question of degree. That said differences can be graded and scaled. That between any two closely related species a hybrid that makes it so that one tends to show a shading off of the properties of one class into those of the next, rather than a sharp-cut distinction between them. As Arthur Lovejoy put it, nature refuses to conform to our craving for clear lines of demarcation. She loves twilight zones, where forms abide which, if they are to be classified at all, must be assigned to two classes at once, such as would conform to expectation, as every engineer, architect, or mechanic designs his machine in such a way that every part fulfilled, to the best possible degree, its role with respect to the next, and to the whole. Any division of creatures, follows Lovejoy, with reference to some one determinate attribute manifestly gives rise to a linear series of classes. The whole, therefore, is not a simple thing. It's that with respect to which there is this or that specific thing. If the parts of said great machine were not, as conceived by Aristotle and others, as intimately connected as the above-quoted passage suggests, if there is, let's say, a discontinuity in the universe whereby a certain class or phenomenon or species does not shade off into another, then there would be no universe. A single instance of discontinuity is enough to cancel out the very condition of being. This great principle is mentioned in the Quran in an amazingly complex but exceedingly articulate way. The key word here is Futoor, translated in this context as flaws, but appears in a quite different sense in the rest of the Quran. For example, it's used in an approximate sense to create in verse 22 of chapter 36. Surely, it cannot mean both flaw and origination at the same time, though the general sense of each context may suggest so. This is where a hermeneutical approach whereby the meaning of a term is drawn from every instance of its application in the text should be carried out. Must not the amazing continuity of the universe be reflected in all of his work, for example, the Quran? It's only right that the very text that we're here holding should, in some sense, mirror the cosmos, that its words are mirrors which must in some sense be understood merely logically. Should it be treated otherwise? Should we exit the circle of the text and seek the aid of a dictionary or the interpretations of an exegete, the meaning gained will not marry up with that of the verse or context from which we've quite literally severed it. The closest term in English to futur is interpolation, which means to insert something of a different nature into something else, or, as we here understand it, the act of introducing into a certain sphere of relations a foreign component. The caveat here is that, upon introduction, the thing ceases to be foreign, and is wholly assimilated into and gains membership in the whole, expanding and enriching with new relations and dependencies rather than disorganizing the sphere. The new component is not simply dropped, or, in the Heideggerian phrase, thrown into the sphere, but rather is made a symbiote, an entity by whose introduction the sphere has gained a new sense, and, reciprocally, a thing whose meaning is found in the manner of its symbiotic subsistence, meaning that understanding the whole would, through and through, demand the inclusion of the part. The verse, "Why should I not worship he who originated me?" if understood in the above sense, would give us a completely different view, that one is originated as a constituent, or member of the universe, a Leibnizian monad. where me becomes me subspecie eternitatis. The change which an expanded sense of the term Futoor entails is profound. It implies membership, that your existence is not an arbitrary event, not a question of chance, not an accident of the time and place, but rather an insertion, an act of reason reared by universal considerations such as the implications of your existence, how conducive you are to the whole, and what precise role your existence is required to fulfill. We are thus to take the person behind the phrase to have had that rich sense in mind when he said it. As Borges wrote in one of his stories, he was seeking a soul worthy of participating in the universe, the circular ruins. This works both as an answer to the question of being as well as a cosmogony, an account of the origination of all things, but also one that's capable of accounting for the existence not only of the whole, but also of each constituent with all its circumstantial complexity. Do you see any flaws? The term flaw here ought to be replaced with discontinuity, as discontinuity would emphasize the precedence of perfect harmony and continuity. Having continuity as a foundation, a universal subject that sufficiently predicates all possible states of being. The question remains of how we can reconcile the first with the second sense of Futoor. How could Futoor, which implies continuity, also imply discontinuity as verse 3 of chapter 67 relays? The answer is, simply, that the word gains its meaning in its constructive relation to other terms in the sentence, i.e., in whether it's used as a subject or the predicate part of the sentence. This is a logical function of negation. An idea can be meaningful in two ways, when implied in the context but isn't directly posited, and when directly posited. For example, the proposition, the latest Intel processor is fast. The idea of processor involves that of RAM, but RAM does not occur in the proposition. The meaning of RAM is preserved in processor as a presupposition, but this elliptical meaning obviously differs from one in which RAM is explicitly mentioned in conjunction with the processor. The processor is supported by sizable RAM. It's given to anyone who is remotely familiar with computer hardware, in the proposition, the latest processor is fast, that a fast processor implies a sizable RAM, because he will know that the function of the RAM will automatically be efficient relative to the processors, and that, logically, the first proposition necessarily implies a second. We understand here that something obviously drives one to make mention of the size of the RAM, rather than leave it as implied by the speed of the processor, and that the second proposition is not in any way superfluous, but emphatic, such as the use of the term Futoor in the above verse. Futoor is the fundamental, invariable, basic cosmogonic condition of the universe. It is given, in speaking about a particular species, that they were introduced at some point by the Creator, that they were interpolated into the cosmic, symbiotic framework of the universe, but we don't mention that. We leave the origin of this species in the background as we proceed to discuss aspects deemed, in that particular instance, more pertinent. So when it comes to a process such as Futoor, positing it without a subject or predicate, as in, when not used to describe the interpolation of this or that other species, has a strange effect of absolute negation. It removes the postulate of creativity, such that, in describing nothing in particular, it describes all. Thus, if nothing in particular is being described by the term Futoor, interpolation, everything is, the universe at large. The novelty suggested by the term there would negate any continuity hitherto maintained. Nature abhors a vacuum, goes the medieval maxim. The universe admits of anomalies only insofar as they're additions, symbiotes, integral and functionally meaningful to the grand scheme of the universe. Where not integral, then they are unrelated to the preceding scheme which we've thus far been following. An assumption arises that since it doesn't fall in line with the previous series, it must be a new series. In the language of cosmology, such interjections are tantamount to a whole new universe, a whole new scheme utterly discontinuous with any scheme that had preceded it. The universe arises simultaneously with each of its constituents. It never ceases, as a whole. There's no universe in the sense of a box with content inside it. It's a single series that's in a state of continuous and progressive unfolding, expanding by means of the constant realization of new possibilities of combination. And combination necessitates some form of pre-established harmony, i.e., a transcendental unity, i.e., the universe itself, much like how all geometrical forms issue from a simple line. If we take another example, the meaning of the verse will be all the more clear. Here the description, the originator, is highly significant, all the more for the context in which it occurs, and the term with which it occurs in association. He posits that he's the originator of the heavens and earth, as we noted previously, refers to the concepts of space and time, and these are, in a sense, the foundation of the universe. By foundation we mean that there exists nothing in the universe apart from their originator, on whose existence they, by extension, everything else depends. They are the very principles from which arise the operations of motion, of progress, of growth, of senescence, and though they manifest themselves physically, their metaphysical being is the actual basis for their physical being. Think about it. Anything that appears either on earth or descends from the heavens. But this description would be inadequate if it doesn't explicitly account for the depth factor phenomena, wherein occurs such things as generation, appearance, and persistence, as well as the corruption and disappearance of things. This is where the true meaning of heavens and earth is contained, in their fourfoldedness, that they carry both the physical as well as the metaphysical sides of being. There must, in a sense, be an extensive as well as intensive ways of representing things. Even ideas are physical, in that they're things in themselves, but their concreteness, which we deem as the quintessential thing, is a question of degree. This is indicated in the verse 4 of chapter 32. It is Allah who has created the heavens and earth and everything in between in 6 days. Heavens and earth constitute a spectrum. On one side lies the heavens, which stands for absolute immateriality, and on the other, the earth, absolute materiality. The material status of phenomena, of beings, is determined by their position in the spectrum. However, the spectrum as a whole is a process of becoming. That is, you don't have to be earthly to be material, or heavenly to be immaterial. All life forms contain this principle within them, where everything in between refers to the forms which mediate concrete existence, and those which approximate them. Because reality or real things are never immediately given to us. They emerge out of things which are not given to our senses, to more complex processes, and those are, in the space-time schema, which we said is the analog of the Quran's heavens and earth, what it refers to as the in-between. Being the most fundamental things in the universe, heavens and earth, or the universe itself, insofar as the universe is an unfolding agglomerate of relations, a system in motion, then what better term expresses their creation besides Futoor? A term which, in this context, describes how the universe arose from a condition, whatever it may be, in which it bore no existence, in the form in which it currently is, at least. It's thus a specification of the more conventional and rather vague term create, as occurs numerous times in the Quran. What may we say is the difference between an expression such as khalaq and that of fatir? Being more frequently used, we are led to believe that the term khalaq is more general and thus deserves to be more frequently used. More general and inclusive terms, you'll find, are, as a rule, more important and more frequently used than their more specialized variants. And the fact of being a more general term means that the comparatively special term, futoor, is already contained in it. Futoor is an aspect of the general process denoted by khalaq, or create, or that futoor is a certain stage in the general scheme of khalq. The difference is approximate to that found between the proposition RAM is computational, which, though permits us to assert the contrary, that all computation involves a function analogous to that fulfilled by the RAM. However, when, as a general definition, i.e., if the aim is a compendious description of the whole process, we propose such a term as would include all aspects of computation, which is to say, define computation in general, then RAM in such a case would merely be one of the terms subsumed in the description, as is inadequate by itself. The more general the term, the better. In this explanation is contained the key to every Quranic proposition. God deploys the term khalq as a most general way of describing the origins of the universe. It does not say fatir in such a context as we find the term khalq because, for purposes of felicity, the chosen term is chosen on the basis of the principle of sufficient reason, a sufficiency whereby any other term is superfluous and distortive to the intended meaning of the verse. What does this reveal if not that creation, in the sense of khalq, is comprised of stages or steps, a fact that, though some may deem obvious and given, seems to have no hermeneutical import in the formation of the concept as some exegeses and translations clearly show. Even in English, we naturally seek such terms as befits our expressive needs, terms which won't fall short of describing that which we intend them to, let's say, capture. We use cold in place of freezing, in place of frosty, or call something red in place of crimson, maroon, scarlet, because the margin of infelicity or error is much narrower in a term like red than in that of crimson, or any other shade of red. Or, let's say, we would be less wrong in calling something red than we would crimson or scarlet, for instance, as in such cases it may be maroon, but we would be right in saying that it's red in either case. Thus we use khalq to describe the general process of creation, and Futoor to describe which stage in the process we refer to. These two terms are among God's many names, though in the former is involved more than can be accounted for by the term fatir. The expression khaliq is given as the background process as the term fatir assumes contextual precedence or priority. In other words, we enter the process of khalq such that it recedes into the background. We understand from this that the terms are related in such a way that both refer to the same general sphere of relations, that, methodologically speaking, we pause and survey the whole process in view of precisely which place each function occupies in relation to the rest, then choose, on the basis of this panoramic view, the term expressive of the function that we're hereafter. The universe is much too complex for the simplicity of men, wrote Borges, and, in a sense, how can someone claim to have found a glitch in the matrix if they have not made out what the matrix is in the first place? Do you see any flaws? Reveals itself as a rhetorical question, the purpose of which is to bring the recipient to reach the position from which the question was originally posed, revealing its didactic motive. The question is designed to bring out and dislodge that aporia, internal contradiction, lodged deep in the doubter's thinking. Unknowingly, in confronting the question, the doubter brings with him the criterion against which he gauges the validity of what he assumes to be the meaning of the verse. He'll point out seeming contradictions, which he feels are littered throughout the universe and the text itself, the Quran, only to find the burden of proof constantly on his side, as proving the inconsistency and disharmony of the universe can only be done by understanding the totality of the universe which he claims to be in disharmony, which is an infinite and impossible task. Here he reveals his criterion, which is harmony, the very condition which he feels the universe fell short of fulfilling. Hence God asks him to look again, i.e., can you not see that if there had been any disharmony, that you yourself would not be here? Questioning that of which you yourself are a product. Identifying a fault in the universe means that you transcend the universe. Do you not see that the universe is an absolute unity and that you're a prime constituent of said unity? We must clarify that the disharmony that we're speaking of, the kind of disharmony that could have prevented the universe from emerging, concerns the fundamental constitution of beings, not any actions which may be viewed as detrimental or corrupt. Thus, though this harmony and corruption can arise, it remains that in being seen as aberrations, suggest a formal and more fundamental state of harmony. It becomes clear that the deeper we delve into this concept, that the object of knowledge of science is to reach a holistic standpoint, to see the universe as a harmonious whole, and, thankfully, seeing it as such does not, as opposed to seeing it otherwise, demand that we understand the universe to the same degree as God. Beautiful and ironic at the same time, that it takes understanding every possible detail, every possible relation, entity, the entire catalog of beings, history of the universe, and the infinite chain of causes and effects to adequately substantiate a single instance of contradiction. But it takes only 2 or 3 cases, as in Abraham's case with the celestial bodies, to prove otherwise. That it is consistent, consonant, and error-free whole. This is obviously God's doing. The Quran describes the vicissitudes of the detractor in a way which can only be captured metaphorically, as darkness upon darkness, waves upon waves of unsubstantiated data overwhelm you as you helplessly try to make sense of what they mean and are. He elaborates that without light, which obviously is a metaphor for intellect, as its frequent use in the Quran testifies, one can hope to gain no light, to gain no insight. The same rhetorical motif resurfaces throughout the Quran, particularly in verse 82 of chapter 4, where it said, in support of the claim that the Quran is consistent and error-free text, that had it been from someone other than God, many inconsistencies and contradictions would have been found. Again, proving a contradiction subjects you to the task, an infinite task, of assimilating the book, as you'll first have to understand the text, and to do so you must, as the famous dictum by Schleiermacher goes, understand the writer better than he understood himself. And you soon find yourself before a mission no less mortifying than that of understanding the universe itself, because the book mirrors it in a way which only by advancing deep enough into its studies can one truly appreciate. Ikhtilaf, contradiction or inconsistency, deserves a slight rectification here. Yes, it means contradiction, but in what sense? Its inflections in the Quran readily provide the answer. Khalifa, yakhluf, khalafa, respectively meaning successor, inherit, behind, etc. Contradiction, these examples show, involve a temporal factor, the process of finding a new standpoint that's judged to be inconsistent with a previously held one, or of ditching a previously held standpoint for a new one. There's indeed a sense of inheritance and succession here, because succession and inheritance both imply a predecessor, specifically one that no longer exists. And thus validity is shifted over to the new point at the expense of the older point. This is only inevitable for entities that indwell the universe. We can see neither the whole, as it is, nor the part in all its painstaking details. All we have are instances which we use as bases from which to carry out certain abstractions and generalizations. Knowledge for us, finite beings, is an unceasing task. At no point can you reach a standpoint that would allow you to see or make an eternally valid rule. Eternally valid in the sense of a rule that will apply in every possible variegated case throughout the whole of human existence. This, the Quran stresses with the term kitab, and kitab is what you call a mandate, which contains in form a thorough exposition of a certain concept or phenomena in a way that allows you to interact with it and understand its morphology, and thus follow it throughout its changes and developments. Kitab is a rule that will apply in all possible cases, however unique the circumstances in which they find themselves. Human law must always change to account for new trends and changes in social norms, to keep up, as it were, and so do all enterprising forms of human activity, which may be said to stem from and depend, for their progress, on that which we find in the example of the legal system that governs the state. For instance, we don't expect anarchies to bring about a great economy, high living standards, technological and industrial innovation. We rather expect them from constitutional states, states with a unified and stable governing systems. The stability of the former is shown to be directly conducive to economic prosperity. We say this to say that a human society's best asset in the long and difficult road to prosperity is a certain effective and stable governing system, one that shows itself to be adaptable, to the greatest possible extent, to new challenges, without being changed or compromised in any way, as often happens. This is the sense in which kitab, book, is used in the Quran.